I have to admit something. Until 6 months ago, I knew nothing about Ibrahim Traoré. Like many, I had only heard of Burkina Faso through negative news about poverty and instability. But as I began to dig deeper into this young man and what he is doing for his country, I realized I had been deceived by the Western media. The true story of Burkina Faso will astonish you as much as it astonished me. Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the most incredible achievements the modern world has ever seen. A nation did what agricultural experts deemed impossible. It completely banned the use of pesticides and, in their place, achieved a 300% increase in productivity. This didn't happen in Switzerland or Denmark with billions of dollars in investment. It happened right in Burkina Faso, one of the world's poorest countries. To understand why this is so earth-shattering, we have to go back to 2020. Burkina Faso was an agricultural nation in dire straits, facing horrendous challenges. 80% of the population lived off agriculture, yet rice yields were a mere 1.2 tons per hectare, 60% lower than the African average. The country had to import nearly 40% of its food to feed its 22 million people. Land degradation from excessive chemical use had destroyed 15% of its arable land in the last 10 years. A second, equally serious problem was the dependency on imported pesticides. Every year, Burkina Faso spent $200 million to import these chemicals, accounting for 25% of the nation's total import bill. These pesticides were not only expensive, but also severely harmed public health. A report from Burkina Faso's Ministry of Health showed up to 15,000 cases of pesticide poisoning annually, with 800 fatalities. The cancer rate in agricultural regions was 3 times higher than in the cities. The third problem was a sustainable cycle of poverty. Farmers had to take on debt to buy pesticides and fertilizers, but low yields made it impossible for them to repay their loans. This created a vicious cycle. The poorer they got, the more chemicals they had to use to maintain output, but the more chemicals they used, the more the land degraded and the higher their costs became. For decades, the World Bank and the IMF insisted that agricultural modernization through Western technology was the only way. They presented figures, reports, and recommendations for a green revolution, with billion-dollar loan packages to buy machinery and chemicals from multinational corporations. International experts declared that organic farming was only suitable for rich countries and couldn't possibly feed Africa's population. They were dead wrong, until Ibrahim Traoré appeared and completely changed the game. Ibrahim Traoré is not your typical politician or a Hollywood celebrity. Born in 1988 to a poor farming family in Mohun province, Traoré understood the hardships of Burkinabe agriculture from a young age. His father, a cotton farmer, lost everything after using poor quality pesticides that led to crop failure and crushing debt. This painful experience shaped Traoré's thinking on sustainable agriculture from very early on. Traoré studied geological engineering at the University of Ouagadougou, but always maintained a keen interest in agriculture and environmental issues. After graduating, he didn't pursue a career in mining like many of his peers, but joined the army with the goal of serving his country. In the military, Traoré was known as a young, visionary officer who constantly studied models of sustainable and self-reliant development. The context of his rise to power occurred on September 30th, 2022, when Traoré led a military coup that overthrew the government of Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. The main reason given was the old administration's failure to address the security and economic crises. The initial reaction from the international community was quite negative, with both the EU and the African Union condemning the coup. However, the people of Burkina Faso were strongly supportive, as they were exhausted by the state of poverty and instability. When Traoré assumed the role of president of the National Salvation Council, his first message was simple yet resolute. We will no longer be slaves of the colonial economic system. Burkina Faso will feed its people with its own hands and its own minds. But unlike the empty promises of past politicians, Traoré had prepared a specific, scientific, and actionable plan. He called it the Burkina Green Campaign, with 3 clear phases. Phase 1 was chemical liberation within the first 6 months. The goal was to completely ban the import and use of synthetic pesticides, replacing them with improved traditional farming methods. The execution included free training for 500,000 farmers in organic techniques, building 1,000 compost production centers in villages, and establishing 10,000 farmer support groups. The required resources were mainly human capital and indigenous knowledge, with a budget of just $50 million from the National Treasury. Phase 2 was production optimization over the next 12 months. Building on the success of Phase 1, this plan scaled up by establishing 50 indigenous seed research centers, developing 200 kilometers of natural irrigation canals, and creating a domestic market system for organic products. The anticipated challenges were skepticism from older farmers and pressure from international chemical corporations, but Traoré had prepared propaganda teams and technical support to address them. Phase 3 is export and replication from the second year onward. The long-term vision is to turn Burkina Faso into Africa's organic export hub, with a goal of reaching $5 billion in export revenue by 2030. The international impact includes sharing the successful model with other African nations and challenging the monopoly of Western agricultural corporations. Sustainability is ensured by training the next generation of farmers and building an agricultural education system starting from elementary school. And the most important thing that made all the difference, it would all be done by the people of Burkina Faso, with the resources and intellect of Burkina Faso. No aid from the World Bank, no loans from the IMF, no dependency on Western technology, no need for foreign experts. And then, on January 15, 2023, the miracle began. January 15, 2023 will be recorded as the day Burkina Faso changed forever. There were no loudspeakers urging people on, no top-down propaganda, no threats or coercion, just a simple message passed from mouth to mouth, from village to village. Today we begin to free our ancestral land from toxins. Every seed we sow, every plant we grow, will be a step towards freedom and prosperity. The people's reaction was immediate and more powerful than even Traoré had imagined. In Bam province in the north, over 25,000 farmers voluntarily joined the program on the first day. They brought local seed varieties that had been preserved for generations, drought-resistant red millet, protein-rich cowpeas, and ancient Burkinabe wheat. Using simple tools like wooden plows and hand-woven baskets, they began to restore the land ravaged by chemicals. The immediate result was the return of beneficial insects and pest-eating birds they hadn't seen in years. An exhilarating spirit spread across the region as the oldest farmers said, "This is how our ancestors fed our nation for 1,000 years." In Hawet province in the west, the unique feature was the active participation of women. Mrs. Aminata Ouedraogo, a 45-year-old widow raising 5 children, said, "I was tired of going into debt to buy pesticides, only to not have enough to pay it back at the end of the season. Now, with homemade compost and self-harvested seeds, I no longer depend on anyone." The most moving detail was the sight of mothers teaching their daughters how to make organic compost from household waste, turning what was once considered filth into the soil's black gold. The initial local challenge was skepticism from middle-aged men, but after witnessing the success of the women's first harvest, they too began to join in. In Yatenga province in the Sahel region, participation reached 40,000 people in a province of only 800,000. This region's unique contribution was the revival of the Zai technique, a method of restoring arid land by digging small pits to concentrate rainwater and organic matter. They coordinated with neighboring provinces to create a 150-kilometer-long green corridor to fight desertification. What was astonishing wasn't just the scale or speed, but the spontaneous spirit of unity among the people. Umar Sawadogo, 28, a teacher who quit his job to return to farming. "When I saw my 65-year-old father successfully abandon pesticides and get higher yields, I realized that true education isn't just in schools, but in our own homeland. Our children need to know how to feed themselves with their own hands and minds, not with expensive imported goods. His family now manages 5 hectares of organic land, their income has doubled, and more importantly, they are completely debt free. But this program wasn't just about emotion or spirit, it was about science, organization, and operational efficiency. The distribution system was organized on a hub and spoke model, with each village having a center for collecting and distributing seeds, compost, and technical knowledge. Work was divided into specialized teams: a compost production team, a seed research team, an irrigation management team, and a product sales team. Coordination used a system of radio communication and mobile phones to share information on weather, techniques, and prices. Any conflicts or disagreements were resolved through the traditional Council of Elders, ensuring consensus and harmony. The simple technology used included homemade straw choppers, drip irrigation systems made from recycled plastic bottles, and soil pH meters made from local materials. Resourcefulness was demonstrated by turning agricultural waste into fertilizer, using native plants for biopesticides, and recycling everything from packaging to rainwater. Small but effective innovations included using neem leaves to preserve seeds and applying intercropping techniques to maximize yield on the same plot of land. Communication operated through a network of community radios and regional WhatsApp groups. Quality assurance was carried out through a cross-checking system among farmer groups, with each cooperative responsible for monitoring the others. Measurement and tracking used simple farming journals to record yields, costs, and time. Adjustment and improvement occurred through weekly meetings in each village, where farmers shared experiences and proposed new solutions. Transparency was ensured as all information about costs, output, and income was made public and discussed openly. A specific example from the village of Kokologo in Bulkiemde province, where a group of 150 farmers, led by 52-year-old Mrs. Marie Caboret, implemented a perfect model. First, they spent 2 weeks analyzing the soil to identify the most chemically contaminated areas. Next, they spent a month building 20 compost pits from agricultural and organic household waste. The biggest challenge was persuading the elders to abandon their habit of using chemical fertilizers, but the solution was to invite them to participate directly in the composting process so they could see the quality for themselves. After 3 months of implementation, the measured results were impressive. Corn yield increased from 1.8 tons per hectare to 3.2 tons per hectare, a 78% increase in a single season. Production costs dropped from $350 per hectare to $180 per hectare, a 49% saving compared to the old method. Labor time was reduced by 30% due to no longer needing to spray pesticides or care for sick plants. Soil quality improved dramatically, with the pH rising from 5.2 to 6.8 and the organic matter content doubling. Mrs. Marie Cabaret shared, "In 30 years of farming, I have never seen soil so black and soft. Before, the ground was hard as rock after the dry season. Now I can dig planting holes with my hands. My grandchildren no longer have to fear being poisoned while helping me in the fields. More importantly, we are free from debt and dependence on outside things." August 15th, 2023 will be remembered in the history of Burkina Faso and perhaps the world. It was the day the results of the first harvest after implementing the nationwide organic agriculture program were announced. The event was held in the capital, Ouagadougou, with representatives from all 45 provinces, where Traoré declared figures that shocked not only Africa, but the entire world. The numbers spoke for themselves. The average rice yield increased from 1.2 tons per hectare to 3.6 tons per hectare, a 300% increase in just 1 year. The average farmer's income rose from $800 per year to $2,100 per year, improving the standard of living for 18 million rural inhabitants. For the first time, Burkina Faso achieved food self-sufficiency and even had a surplus of 500,000 tons of rice to export to neighboring countries. The child malnutrition rate dropped from 35% to 12% within 10 months. Compared to the initial forecast by international experts that yields would fall by 40% without chemicals, the actual results far exceeded all expectations. But the most impressive figure wasn't a dry statistic, but the change in national spirit and pride. For the first time in decades, the people of Burkina Faso believed they could solve their own problems without depending on foreign aid. Surveys showed that 87% of the population trusted in the country's ability to achieve sustainable development, up from 34% at the end of 2022. A visibly moved Traoré said at the event, "Today, we are not just harvesting rice, we are harvesting national pride and dignity. Every grain of rice in these sacks contains the sweat, tears, and dreams of the Burkinabe people. We have proven that Africa does not need saving. We can save ourselves and become a beacon of hope for the whole world." But this was only the beginning of a larger revolution. In the following 12 months, visible changes spread across Burkina Faso. Economically, agricultural GDP grew by 45% year over year, contributing an additional $1.8 billion to the national economy. Employment in the agricultural sector increased by 60%, with 2.3 million new jobs created, primarily for rural youth. Agricultural exports reached $600 million in 2023, 4 times the figure for 2022. Foreign investment in the organic agriculture sector reached $300 million, mainly from European countries seeking to import clean products. In terms of social life, the most noticeable change was in the quality of people's nutrition. The average farming family now consumes 40% more organic food, with a diet rich in protein from beans and vitamins from homegrown vegetables. The school attendance rate increased from 68% to 89% as families became more financially stable and no longer needed their children to drop out to help with farm work. Primary healthcare services improved as the government had more budget from agricultural taxes to build 200 new health clinics in rural areas. The security situation and social order stabilized as people had steady jobs and decent incomes. Psychologically and spiritually, the most profound change was how people viewed themselves and their future. From a mentality of waiting for aid, they shifted to a spirit of self-reliance. Trust in the government soared from 23% to 78%, the highest in the country's history. The most observable behavior was that rural youth no longer flocked to the cities, but stayed in their hometowns to develop agriculture. A new culture was forming. Pride in Burkina Faso's organic agriculture, with harvest festivals held regularly to celebrate the achievements of farmers. Moussa Traoré, no relation to the president, a 34-year-old farmer in Koudougou shared, "I used to be ashamed to say I was a farmer, and my children didn't want to follow this path because they thought it was backward and poor. Now I proudly tell people I am a food producer for Burkina Faso. My 16-year-old son has asked to study organic agriculture at school and dreams of becoming an agricultural engineer to develop new farming techniques. Our lives have completely changed because we are no longer afraid of the future." The before and after images show a stark difference, from brown, arid fields with depleted soil to lush green carpets with rich black earth, from empty granaries to storehouses overflowing with sacks of rice piled high as mountains, from worried, anxious faces to confident smiles and hopeful eyes. The impact rippled beyond Burkina Faso's borders with growing force. In the West Africa region, neighboring countries like Mali, Niger, and Ghana sent observer missions to learn from the model. The Malian government began piloting an organic agriculture program in 5 southern provinces with guidance from Burkinabe experts. Niger signed a cooperation agreement to import organic seeds and learn composting techniques. Even Senegal, considered a more developed nation, invited Burkina Faso to share its experience in sustainable agriculture. This completely shifted the balance of power in the region, with Burkina Faso transforming from an aid recipient to a knowledge provider. Globally, the reaction from international organizations was varied. The United Nations recognized Burkina Faso as a best practice in sustainable agriculture and invited the country to join the Global Food Security Council. However, the World Bank and IMF remained skeptical, arguing that the model was not replicable and was only suited to Burkina Faso's specific conditions. Development experts were divided. One camp was enthusiastically supportive, calling it a paradigm shift, while the other remained doubtful about its long-term sustainability. The international media reflected this polarization. BBC and CNN provided brief, cautious coverage, while Al Jazeera and African media reported extensively and positively. New academic studies emerged from leading universities like Harvard, Oxford, and the Sorbonne, focusing on analyzing the Burkina Faso phenomenon. The global investment community began to take notice, with many sustainable investment funds opening offices in Ouagadougou. The most remarkable thing was the positive contagion effect that no one predicted. Farming communities in South America, Asia, and even Europe began adopting Burkina Faso's organic farming techniques. A group of farmers in Brazil invited experts from Burkina Faso to teach them composting and sustainable land management. This completely reversed the flow of knowledge from south-north to south-south and even south-north. Dr. Sarah Johnson, an agriculture expert at the London Institute for Development Studies, commented, "Burkina Faso has done what we thought was impossible in 50 years of development research. They have proven that high technology and large investments don't always yield the best results. Sometimes simplicity, science, and determination are the key. We are having to rewrite the textbooks on development economics." This isn't just a short-term success or a temporary phenomenon. Traoré has a very clear and scientific long-term vision for Burkina Faso's sustainable development. Phase 2, from 2024 to 2025, focuses on the industrialization of organic agriculture. The expansion plan includes building 50 medium and small-scale agricultural processing plants in rural areas, developing the Burkina organic brand for global export, and training 10,000 professional agricultural technicians. The specific goal is to reach $3 billion in organic agricultural export revenue by the end of 2025. The anticipated challenges are fierce competition from international agricultural corporations and quality pressure from export markets, but the solution is to invest heavily in international quality certification systems and build modern testing laboratories. Resource allocation prioritizes education and training, with 40% of the development budget dedicated to human capital. Phase 3, from 2026 to 2030, aims for a regional hub of sustainable agriculture. The greater ambition includes turning Burkina Faso into Africa's largest organic export center, establishing the first African University of Organic Agriculture, and leading the African Green Revolution 2.0 movement. The expected international impact is to change the entire continent's agricultural production methods and create an African agricultural market independent of the West. Technological development includes researching AI and IoT to optimize organic farming while ensuring this technology is accessible to smallholder farmers. Institution building will occur through the establishment of an African Organic Agriculture Council and the creation of a model legal framework for sustainable agriculture. The 2030 vision is for Burkina Faso to become a high middle-income country with a per capita GDP of $3,500, a five-fold increase from 2022. Its regional and global position will be that of the Singapore of African agriculture, a leading hub for agricultural technology, knowledge, and trade. The quality of life for its people will be comprehensively improved, with the poverty rate below 5%, 95% of children completing secondary education, and average life expectancy rising to 70 years. Its contribution to humanity will include providing a sustainable development model applicable to 500 million smallholder farmers worldwide and helping to solve the global food crisis. And most importantly, this model can be replicated and applied to any nation or community with the right determination and methodology. So what can we learn from the miracle of Burkina Faso? The story of Burkina Faso teaches us four important lessons that any community can apply. The first lesson is the power of self-reliance. When Burkina Faso refused to depend on aid and decided to solve its own problems, it discovered immense hidden resources and capabilities that were previously obscured by a waiting for salvation mentality. A specific example: instead of waiting for the World Bank to fund expensive pesticides, Burkinabe farmers researched and developed 47 types of biopesticides from native plants, which were just as effective at only one-tenth the cost. This means any community can find solutions from its own resources and wisdom, instead of always seeking help from the outside. The second lesson is the value of unity. Burkina Faso's success didn't come from a single genius, but from the collective power of 18 million people working towards a common goal. A specific example: when one village faced a seed shortage, 10 neighboring villages automatically shared their supplies without any top-down directive. When one area lacked water for irrigation, other areas sent people to help dig wells and build irrigation systems. This teaches us that in any project or goal, collective strength always surpasses individual effort, and mutual support is the key to all sustainable success.